My name's Justin the Clue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today, we're talking about the man with the 1,000-watt smile, Willem Dafoe.
Now, I want to underline this. He was born in Wisconsin in 1955 as William James Dafoe.
I'm going to say
William Dafoe
throughout this episode. And he said in interviews he changed his name because he didn't like being called Billy, and his dad was also called William, so he didn't want to have that, two names in the same family.
Well, I only found this out like last year.
And you were furious.
I wish he was here right now so I could punch him in the jaw for having driven us down this madness of Willem for all these years.
Do you think he corrects people when they call him William? He probably just lets it go,
I think he probably lets it go. Probably just smiles and nods. But anyway, Willem Dafoe, look, he's a popular, highly respected actor, and if anything, I think he's underrated.
Is he a popular actor in that my parents or people that are not like movie people would recognize him if they saw them?
Oh, I think so. He may not be a box office draw.
He's like top tier character actor, if you will, in blockbusters or bigger films.
And leading man in smaller films. But I mean, you look at his filmography, first of all, I think he has maybe the best filmography of any actor at his level. I mean, it covers the waterfront from Wild at Heart to Last Temptation of Christ to Antichrist to Spider-Man, everything from left to right to up to down.
And he's always passionate about the movies that he makes. If you hear him in interviews, he talks about how he likes directors who have a very strong vision, and he's attracted to directors like that, which would explain and all the choices that he makes. And also, he clearly has good taste.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting filmography because he's in some of the biggest movies. He's in, Spider-Man No Way Home and all sorts of blockbusters. But he also has a particular stable of auteurs that he works with through thick and thin. Abel Ferrara, Paul Schrader, Lars von Trier, Wes Anderson. He's worked with these people even during times when they were not bankable and fashionable. He uses the Spider-Man clout to get 6 Abel Ferrara movies made.
One thing that really surprised me when reading about probably the most famous role he's had, which is as the Green Goblin in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, is that he fought for that role to the point that he did a screen test for that role, which is almost unthinkable at the level that he is as an actor.
2-time Academy Award nominee by the time he was in that movie.
And if people don't know, usually when actors get to a certain level, they're like, offer only. Like, I'm not going to do a screen test. You know who Willem Dafoe is.
And, when the recent Spider-Man No Way Home came out, he gave interviews, including one for GQ, where he said he actually wanted his role to be expanded so he could build on what he did in that first movie. Now, oftentimes when people of his level and experience are in a superhero movie and they say something like that, it's like...
You see, like, the PR person with a gun trained on their back?
Yeah. It's like, oh, I see the dump truck full of money at your house. Yeah. But in his case, I think I believe it because, there are many actors who... many great actors who get to his age. He's 66 now, I think. And they get tired and lazy and mercenary.
Robert De Niro-ish, if you will.
I mean, he's the go-to example, isn't he? And I'm sure, obviously, money is a consideration in what Willem Dafoe chooses. But even in those more mercenary movies, there's this joy of performance.
Like, if you look at him in Spider-Man 2 and 3, where he only appears in kind of like hallucinations, he is giving it his all. Like, he did not have to show up in those movies. But when he screams, "Avenge me!" it's like, that's why you hire this guy.
And you mentioned Robert De Niro. I mean, Robert De Niro's range has contracted as he's gotten older. He can still be great at times, occasionally. Yes. Not that often, but
if you get his like grizzled face in a close-up and you project on that him thinking about death and the mistakes that he's made in his life.
Yeah, but
like in Dirty Grandpa.
That's right. But he's can be great in that narrower space. And with Dafoe, like, yeah, he's in his 60s, and I guess he can't play a young man anymore, but he keeps finding new kinds of roles, new textures. A movie like The Lighthouse, for example.
Oh, he's so funny in that movie.
And I think breaks new ground within, playing with that kind of language, that kind of physical performance. The things he does with his face in that movie are all new.
Well, the thing about Dafoe is that if you saw him in a couple of movies, you could make the broad assumption that, he only does really one thing, right? The intense villain. Because because that's the kind of face that he had. It's such an easy to caricature face. You give it that big smile, those intense eyes. You think you could just box him into one thing. But if you look at his career, he's found clever ways to utilize that face and that intensity to play people all over the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing somebody with a face like that, which is like...
You don't know anyone with a face like that.
No, it's insanity. It's like the Jack Nicholson Joker face. And
Yes.
and like you don't... The fact that he's played roles as varied as like Wild at Heart, but also like a character like the Florida Project, where he's sort of warm and avuncular, in addition to possessing a sort of relaxed authority.
Because that's the thing, is that is the role that you give to, Willem Dafoe.
Yeah.
And like when you talk about like Florida Project or even something like The Lighthouse, where his intensity is not necessarily in the service of being only threatening, but is funny and he's playing at that level, like that is an actor who's got every tool at his disposal.
Or Pasolini, where it's a very kind of like still performance. It's a very inward performance, but like there's something about that face that suggests like a deep intelligence.
Now, what do you think if he had played the Joker in Tim Burton's film? What would that movie have looked like?
Well, I think it would have had different kinds of edges than the Jack Nicholson performance. Like he was younger at the time, and I think he was a little... I love Nicholson in that movie.
I mean, we love Nicholson in that movie, but I think the difference is that the audience going to see Batman knows Jack Nicholson.
That's right.
But they wouldn't necessarily have known Dafoe, so they wouldn't have been that same kind of like comedic, I guess, pulse through the film.
Yeah, Nicholson's he's a little shticky. He has a persona.
While like Willem Dafoe, you know him at that point, but you wouldn't like kind of have read into it. It would have been, I think, a meaner performance that like when he would have shaken the hand and he's laughing, you feel more threatened. I mean, I felt threatened as a child when Jack Nicholson turned Jack Palance into a skeleton.
Yeah.
But I think it would have probably been even more intense if Dafoe had been in that role.
Oh, I think we read the same recent GQ profile with him, which was tied to the release of Spider-Man No Way Home.
What? They're not interviewing for the new Abel Ferrara film that he stars in?
It's crazy, isn't it? Anyway, in that interview, he said that he likes to become a creature for the directors he works for. And by this, I think he likes to turn himself over wholeheartedly to the filmmaker. And you can see that in the working relationships he has with these people. Well, Abel Ferrara in particular, the sorts of places that he goes with Ferrara. He's also quoted in that piece saying, "I like the fact that someone needs you to do something for them, and that frees you from a kind of delusion and a certain kind of self-centered view. But if you have a good rapport with that person and they put you in a situation that pushes you, you're going to learn something." Now, I think this sort of gets at what I value about him. More than any other actor of his level of fame, I think, he seems fearless. Like he'll put his body through anything. The sort of extremes of performance style, like he's not afraid to mug. He's not afraid to be broadly comic or deeply vulnerable.
When I think of Willem Dafoe, the thing that comes to mind is an extreme to the performance. But then, I'm thinking of like other extreme performers. For example, like Christian Bale in The Machinist. And I feel there isn't that sense of pretension to Dafoe's performances, or even the like, look at me, I'm doing this and I'm pushing it as far as it can be. So like the act of doing it is as valuable to the performer as the performance that he's putting in the movie.
Well, as well, I watched one of those videos, the Willem Dafoe breaks down his career, one of those Vanity Fair YouTube things. And something that comes a lot in that video is that he likes to lose touch with himself. So when he was making Last Temptation of Christ, he said that while filming in Morocco, the modern world seemed to fade away. It was so isolated and remote and so immersed in the sort of aesthetics of that time. Or, when he made Shadow of the Vampire, there's 3 hours of makeup applied every day. And that puts him in a headspace of like losing touch with himself. And I think from all his interviews, obviously he's a smart guy, but he seems a very like instinctual actor. And yeah, he seems to like to just like lose touch with his ego, lose touch with his surroundings, and also enter into this relationship with these filmmakers where he just submits to them.
Well, I think that probably goes back to the fact that, he started in theater and that he was one of the founding members of the experimental theater group, the Wooster group, and that kind of like, giving yourself to the ensemble is part of that kind of experimental journey, that it's not about the individual as the centerpiece to the art that you're making.
In fact, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but there's a scene in TOMMASO, his film with Abel Ferrara that I know we both watched this week, where he's like leading an acting class and he says words to the effect of performing is always between control and abandon. I wrote it down. It doesn't entirely make sense to me, but he says, when we do some of these distracting things that don't seem to go together, it makes you feel off balance. But if you can relax in that state, it makes you more emotionally available. And he goes on like that. There seems in his whole style and methodology this push-pull between control and abandon.
So if we talk about his biography, there's not anything particularly exciting about how he grew up.
Grew up in, Wisconsin, born in 1955, moved to dirty New York in 1975, became one of the founding members of the Wooster Group alongside the likes of Jill Clayburgh and Spalding Gray, who you've all seen in Maraschino Cherry.
Ah, yes, the classic Radley Metzger hardcore film.
That's right. Yeah, the Wooster Group, I mean, I don't know too much about it, but it's like
theater. Wait, the stuff moves 24 frames per second in that?
Well, actually a little bit, because the Wooster Group, I do know that they incorporate a lot of like mixed
multimedia.
Yeah, a lot of video and pre-recorded audio and strange stuff like that. And they're still going to this day. In fact, by the way, in that video, that Vanity Fair one, he said that when Troy Duffy was pursuing him for Boondock Saints, came and saw a Wooster Group.
And he said, I don't think Troy Duffy made heads or tails of my performance, but I guess he was impressed.
Yeah.
Probably impressed that he wanted Willem Dafoe in his movie, a major Hollywood actor. I love the idea that there are multiple films that are made on the back of Willem Dafoe. It's like, well, we got Dafoe. All right, you got the funding.
By the way, we hadn't even mentioned Boondock Saints up to this point, but this is what I love about that career. It's like his career is just this incredibly broad net where, he's in Mississippi Burning, and he's in, the Spider-Man movie or a million other blockbusters, and he's in, there's a vast amount of people who love him for the Boondock Saints.
Yep. He said in that video that anyone who comes up to him under a certain age, he's like, well, they're going to talk about the Boondock Saints.
Or just carrying themselves a certain way. Yeah.
So if we just track his career, his first major role in a motion picture was in Heaven's Gate, but he's not even credited in it. I don't think he has any lines.
Or his first role in a major motion picture.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, he also starred in The Loveless, Catherine Bigelow's first feature film. And if you see him in that, he looks like almost a cartoon, like his face so smooth, handsome. He's supposed to play like a motorbike rider, and he is the perfect embodiment of that thing.
To Live or Die in L.A., obviously another big early credit as well.
Yeah, well, he became like a villain, right? So he's like Walter Hill Streets of Fire. He's wearing those overalls. He's just hamming it up, and you'd think that's what his career would be. Like, if he was making films earlier in Hollywood, they're like, all right, you're going to be the black hat in all of these cowboy movies, and that's the rest of your career.
And I guess Platoon sort of blew him up and showed the vast range.
Academy Award winning, that intensity in his eyes. I mean, every
Academy Award nominated, we should say.
Sorry, in my heart, he's winning. And that, every cover of the film is him being shot. Sorry, spoiler alert for Platoon. But looking at his career, it's interesting to see kind of the choices that he makes following Platoon. That was the movie that I think brought him to a level of attention that took him above just being, the character actor that you hire over and over again. And then Martin Scorsese's Last Temptation of Christ made him a leading man, which at any other time would have probably been an impossibility for him.
An interesting casting choice at that time. I mean, I don't fully know the behind the scenes story of why he was cast in that movie, but I mean, it's a gentle performance that he gives in the movie, but there's something about Dafoe in both his face and his manner that hints at a roiling inside that I guess fit that interpretation of Christ.
I think Scorsese's decision for that particular role was listen, people have an image of the white Jesus in their mind. And I do not want to cast
Jim Caviezel, yeah.
in the role because that's the cartoony image of Jesus. I want something with hard edges that even if you see him for just a moment, there's something that feels off about him just if you glance at him, and that adds the intensity to every scene that they're portraying. That's the amazing shot of him turning water into wine, and Martin Scorsese whips the camera around and he just kind of goes holds it up,
gives a wink. Yeah, popular gif these days.
Yeah, because it's a great scene.
You watched Last Temptation of Christ again this week.
I did. I mean, great movie. Every time I watch it, I'm like, have I seen this? And it's of course I have. We did an episode of Jesus on it, and it always just hits me every time, and I can't help but think about everything that surrounds the movie. The fact that what would have Martin Scorsese's version of this film have been if he didn't have like so little money? And because he has so little money, it's that much more kind of impactful.
I'm so glad he only had this amount of money.
Me too.
Like I love the sort of like the fact that the Sermon on the Mount in that movie is just like it's not even a sermon.
It's like a
on the
dozen
Mount.
people.
Yeah, and it just has this kind of like Pasolini quality.
In the commentary, he's like, oh, but if it was done at this time, there wouldn't be that many people. And it actually kind of like Willem Dafoe's everybody's
William Dafoe.
Oh no, you got me. Willem Dafoe's performance in the film fits that kind of AIP energy perfectly. And, listening to the commentary track, Willem Dafoe said, I don't know why he hired me. They did everybody in Hollywood at the time, but I'm the one who got the role, so I just got in there.
By the way, don't you find that in his interviews and his commentary tracks, there's kind of like, there's a limit to how much he says or can say? Like, I do think he's very instinctive.
Willem?
Yeah. Like, I remember when Antichrist came out, like seeing a TIFF Q&A with him, and his sort of like, at the time, Antichrist was such a controversial movie and people wanted like some explanation.
Yeah, some like subtextual, like, how did you approach it?
Why is it this way? Justify this movie. And I just remember him being kind of like, I don't know, I just think it's like a beautiful painting, Yeah,
I didn't see anything where he talked about his particular acting process, like, oh, does he go in super prepared? But I don't get that sense from the way that he plays all of these roles, that there is like a spark of energy in him that you get in every role, even though if he's not like, given a big Spider-Man or Boondock Saints performance, there is still like his eyes, his face. Anytime he smiles, like that smile is a thousand water. And when you put it within the context of how he looks and that he just carries himself, it gives it that edge that you feel that he doesn't need to like, oh, I need to get into this character beforehand because I will get into the character while I'm on set.
One of his most prolific collaborators is Paul Schrader. And actually, I think my favorite Dafoe performance in a Schrader movie is in Autofocus.
I mean, we love that scene where they both jack off and they're watching the pornography.
Or Greg Kinnear's like looking at the TV and he says, "Wait, what's your hand? Why is your hand on my ass?" Mm-hmm. And he's like, "It's an orgy." Like, I don't know. I just love his sort of deadpan performance in that movie.
How did you feel like in that Vanity Fair interview? He's like, I just kind of learned that these are comedies afterwards. I feel like that's a very humble thing to say, but he knows what he's doing.
Seems a little disingenuous.
Yes.
Yeah. So Light Sleeper. I hadn't seen this one in a while.
Me neither. I'm surprised that I kind of pushed past it when we did our Schrader episode. Probably because I was like, all right, I get it.
Well, it's another
The
one of
Lonely
those.
Man movies.
Yeah.
But man, from a distance, love it. So good.
I mean, I think I like Schrader more and more as the years go by, and I think I'm like even more receptive than I was then when we did that episode to kind of like, oh, this is where that character is on the journey of Schrader's career. Like,
well, what's fascinating about Light Sleeper is that it can almost not exist without the other films, that they're always in constant discussion with like Taxi Driver or even, the later films that we would made like
First Reformed, Master
exactly.
Gardener. Well, like Taxi Driver feels like an angry young man's movie. And
absolutely.
And First Reformed, Card Counter, they're like old man
movies.
And this one is a middle-aged man's movie.
But what's great about it is that like if I knew this going in, I would have probably been, I want to see that. It's kind of a hopeful movie as well. Like there's still sadness and there's still destruction within the film. But at the end of the day, it's about Dafoe reaching, could it be some kind of bliss perhaps? I wonder how Schrader could visually illustrate that in some way.
Some sort of pickpocket ending, if you will. Yeah.
Wait, you saw Master Gardener, right? Does he do it again?
No, he doesn't.
Damn it.
Oh, it's got all the other Schrader stuff.
Oh, but man, at the end of the Card Counter, I remember sitting at the cinema being like, I can't believe he's doing it again. So good.
So yeah, in Light Sleeper, he plays a drug dealer who's sort of on the precipice of middle age. He's been in prison for 4 years, during which time he originally became a drug dealer to feed his own habit, but he's become clean over the years, but can't get out of being a drug dealer. And so the film follows him just on the cusp of Giuliani's New York. But like the atmosphere is particular. It has a kind of like 2 a.m. woozy atmosphere, and yet it's also not. The style isn't really in your face. It's much more coldly objective than Taxi Driver is.
But I find that Dafoe's performance in this is kind of threading that needle that Schrader is trying to pull off, in the sense that, like, in any other movie, you would expect something horrible to happen to Dafoe or for him to do a horrible thing. And just his presence and knowing who he is as just a performer and where he could go, you keep expecting that to happen. Like, oh, he's going to fall back into drugs, or he's going to do something tasteless, or he's going to do something like morally repugnant. But no, He's just trying to kind of like get a handle on himself and be better. And that's what the entire movie's about.
And, knowing Dafoe and what he's capable of, you think that he could go like, he could do the Harvey Keitel Bad Lieutenant performance. But he's very, not to get hack about it, but he's very Bressonian in the film.
But that's why you hire someone like Dafoe, because that intensity is there. But like that's the opposite of Bressonian almost, because Bresson's models, they're supposed to be like a vacant look on their face. I don't know if Dafoe can do that vacantness.
Yeah, well, Paul Schrader as a filmmaker has always been stuck halfway between like the Bresson influence and the sort of like
maximalist.
Yeah, the Martin Scorsese like sex and violence vibe. And so in Dafoe, there's a performer that like is in the midpoint between those two aesthetics. Like he's obviously been hired. He's supposed to be understated. Schrader wants him to play it like still, but he hired somebody with a certain amount of like God-given like radiation coming off him.
Has Schrader talked about that he's pleased with how Light Sleeper turned out? I don't remember what he says in Schrader on Schrader.
I seem to recall that when in Film Comment, when he submitted his best of the 90s
was Light Sleeper in there?
Top 10 list, yeah, Light Sleeper was on there.
So it's not one of Schrader's, I cast the wrong guy or gal, and then the movie doesn't work.
Yeah.
And Light Sleeper is probably one of the perfect Dafoe performances if you're looking at like what can he do without going super big, because I feel that that's the thing that when you think of Dafoe, you're like magnetically attracted to those things, because even something like Platoon, like what you remember is him at the end like just making a huge face as the bullets rip through his back.
Oh, and mind you, I just want to put on the record that I do think he's capable of being bad. Like,
Dafoe?
Yeah.
Where would you say that he was bad in?
So I haven't seen it since it came out, but The Life Aquatic.
Oh, you think he's bad in Life Aquatic? Controversial opinion.
Maybe I'd feel differently.
Too goofy, like with the accent and stuff like that?
Yeah, maybe if I saw it again, I'd feel differently. I do think like it's a problem of the movie as well. Like that's a movie that's sort of all over the place.
I remember liking Life Aquatic and finding Willem Dafoe funny in it, but I feel like that's probably completely character-based and like what was demanded of him in that film.
I'm sure you haven't seen Boondock Saints in a long time, but
I did watch some clips of him in it.
Yeah, so did I.
And I went, yeah, that's what I remember.
Yeah, same. And I have to say, watching those clips this time, I kind of thought like, well, why not?
Yeah, he's in the movie. Yeah, everything is turned up to 11. So why doesn't he just kind of like break the board with his performance?
And also, I think he's kind of like the closest thing to a good thing in that movie.
Yes. Wait, you mean the cult classic Boondock Saints is not a hallowed classic?
Oh, excuse me. I forgot Ron Jeremy's performance.
Oh, God. You're bringing it all back.
You remember being in high school,
and my friend's like, you got to see Boondock Saints.
Sitting in some fucking basement,
I had a friend, his name was Daniel, and he handed me, it's like, you got to watch this movie, man.
Everyone had that friend. Yeah.
Why was it that one? Why wasn't Boondock Saints just like hit that nerve? Because it's such a lame movie.
I know, but that's why. That's why when you're in high, I didn't even like that when I was in high school. Not to brag.
I liked it when I was in high school.
You did?
Yeah, probably for a month, and then I moved on.
Yeah.
And I would look back and go, no, not good. When you have nothing, a little bit of something, I guess, is enough. It's like, I love Fight Club back then, too.
I still think Fight Club's pretty good.
I think Fight Club is way better than Boondock Saints.
Thing is, I was in high school. I was watching, Reservoir Dogs and stuff, and it's like
just as good as Boondock Saints.
I think I knew at the time. Okay, Reservoir Dogs, higher level. Than... Listen, folks, I'm always on the right side of history. Don't bet against me. Did you ever see Boondock 2?
I think I maybe watched 15 minutes of it. Dafoe comes back
at the end.
Yes,
and he's there for the cliffhanger ending for Boondock 3, which any day now, I'm hoping.
I can't believe that movie came out after Overnight, the documentary about the director, was escaped.
I think I was happy for him actually when it did. I thought, you know what, good for you. You fucking did it.
You were able to
showed everyone
that movie was popular enough that it didn't matter that there's a whole documentary dedicated to how much of a piece of crap you are.
Yeah.
So, I watched a film I think it's White Sands that it's called, and it was during the Can we make Willem Dafoe just a generic Hollywood leading man? And I think that one, what kind of sinks it is the fact that it's directed by everyone's favorite, journeyman of the 90s, Roger Donaldson.
What else? Was he Tomorrow
Dante's
Never
Peak?
Dies? Yeah.
And no, he wasn't Tomorrow Never Dies. I was surprised. I don't think he did a James Bond film. He's a guy that was like a New Zealand director and made like these really hard-hitting, like early New Zealand movies. And then he went on and he's like, 13 Days, Dante's Peak, Species, the remake of The Getaway, Cocktail. But like early on, he had Sleeping Dogs, Smash Palace is one that brings up a lot. But now it's like The November Man, the Pierce Brosnan.
Oh, that's
film.
why I thought
That's why you thought of it, yeah. He's kind of like the go-to, like, you will be shocked to hear that he interviewed Martin Campbell at a DJ screening. Like, if there were ever two kind of personalities that were made for each other, it's those two.
The boys.
And so, like, in that film, like, he's surrounded by great performances, like Samuel Jackson's in the film as well, but he's just asked to not do very much. So that intensity is there, but there's no way to kind of direct it anywhere, because he's just kind of doing kind of like, 90s generic thriller stuff. So he's not bad, but he's just present.
Well, I watched Body of Evidence.
Yes, a film I said, "Oh, we're gonna watch," and then I looked at Will's letterbox. Like, "Oh, I guess he didn't watch it." So
I did. You know what? I watched it and I didn't write a review yet because I didn't want to shoot my wad. So here I am, having watched fucking Body of Evidence.
And how was it? Or how was Willem Dafoe in it?
Well, first of all, the movie has a reputation for being bad, and it is.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's more than 2 hours too, right?
No, it's a little under 2 hours.
Oh, okay.
Even the unrated version that I watched on Tubi. So it's the story of a woman who's on trial for fucking her husband to death. That's the premise. And they have to, like, was it intentional? Was it not? She's played by Madonna. She's in a Anna Nicole Smith-like marriage to a wealthy old pervert. Willem Dafoe plays her attorney. The tension is that this lawyer becomes, seduced and corrupted by this femme fatale character.
The innocent man played by Willem Dafoe.
Well, I think you've just there, without even watching the movie, hit on kind of what's wrong with it. I mean, for this to work,
Madonna.
You've got to think he's either never been looked at by a woman before, or that she's tapping into something that's been long repressed. And in this movie, like, he's married to like 30-year-old Julianne Moore, and they seem to have a very robust sex life based on the visual evidence we see on screen. And, he's Willem Dafoe. His face looks like the devil himself.
So is that how you would describe Willem Dafoe's face?
I mean, it could, yeah.
Like, if someone asked me to, like, draw Willem Dafoe's face with one shape, it would definitely be a triangle. Like, because of the way the smile goes up, I just imagine it just kind of, and that's, I guess, if you're talking about the devil, that's what it looks like. It's that triangle.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a movie that, like, the whole central thing doesn't work. And, it's kind of going for a Paul Verhoeven, overheated tone. And, it
Doesn't work.
It's bad, folks. Body of Evidence. Famously bad movie is bad.
One that doesn't get talked about that much.
It's interesting, though, just because, like, as we've seen, he can play all sorts of roles, Florida Project to The Lighthouse to whatever. And, here's a role that it looks like he's just miscast in. And I think maybe in a better movie, he could have pulled off a role like that.
Well, I'm sure that he was also interested in the role because it was directed by a guy who had some heat at the time.
Ulai something or other, yeah.
And because I think he did Last Exit to Brooklyn was one of his.
That's right.
And so, like, you can understand, there's maybe a Paul Verhoeven style visionary coming to Hollywood to make a picture that could maybe be another, I always get it, Basic Instinct.
Yeah, also I think frankly, like, all of the explicit sex in the movie was probably a bit of an attraction, just in terms of, like, for an actor who likes to, like, fully throw himself into roles and, like, experiment, he probably thought that was an interesting, like, terrain in which to play, one of those, like, explicit sexual thrillers.
So, like, even if it's a role that, maybe you don't feel that he works very well in, you can intellectualize why he would pick it, other than, like, I love money.
I'm sure there was a bit of that too. Also, big movie Madonna at the height of her fame.
I mean, he definitely does not do all the Abel Ferrara films for money.
No.
And that's, if you look at his career, he'll have a couple movies and then he'll be interrupted by an Abel Ferrara film.
So we both watched one of the more recent ones. They've made 6 or 7 movies together, and Tommaso completes the Brundlefly-like transformation of the two of them joining together.
I like that some of the synopses say, William Dafoe plays a screenwriter living in Italy. And it's like, no. He's just writing the films that Abel Ferrara directs.
So yeah, the
Did they
concept.
ever say he's a director in the film?
Well, there's a whole AA meeting that he goes to where he's like, "So we're making the movie in Miami, and I'm hot shit, and I'm on
it's
crack."
going to be like La Dolce Vita. We're giving way more gravel to the performance.
We're doing an Abel impression.
Yeah, we're doing an Abel impression.
But so the Tommaso character is saying that, and it's like, oh, that's the Blackout.
Yes.
That's the movie Abel Ferrara made in Miami. And like,
I mean,
okay,
he's
wait,
storyboarding for the Serbia?
Siberia,
Siberia, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so but like he's giving that AA meeting and he's talking about this, and it's like, wait, are you a screenwriter or are you an actor? Because we saw him leading an acting class elsewhere.
Can you imagine an Abel Ferrara acting class? So what you gotta do is, you move your body.
So what exactly, he's a character who's in the film industry. What exactly he does is a little, he is both Willem Dafoe and Abel Ferrara.
Now, one of the questions that kept hitting me while watching this film, even beyond Dafoe's performance,
Is who is this based on?
no, would this work if you do not know who Abel Ferrara is?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I don't know. Would anything Godard made after Breathless work if you didn't know who Godard is?
Made Breathless? Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, it's like there are certain filmmakers who like their work is part of a much longer like conversation.
But like this film is in particular like in constant tension of, hey, this is Abel Ferrara. I mean, it's his wife, it's his daughter that's on screen. He talks about he's living in Italy just like Abel does, and that Dafoe does live in Italy now.
I believe they're neighbors.
That's so funny. Shut up, Ferrara, turn it down.
Slumber Party? I don't know.
Who knows?
I mean, would it work? I actually think it might work if you didn't know who Ferrara is, just because, like, I mean, it's beautifully shot. It's like, the nicest looking home movie you've ever seen.
Well, it looks like a home movie. It's like browned. The camera seems to be almost catching the moments as they happen.
It's Werner Herzog's cinematographer,
really?
by the way, who shot it. Peter Zeitlinger.
And it was a COVID movie, wasn't it?
It was 2019, so it was before. Zeros and Ones was a COVID.
Oh, okay.
It feels like it could be a COVID movie.
Yeah, because it feels like, just come to my apartment, man, and you can just shoot, and, Defoe's gonna have sex with my wife.
Well, like all of Ferrara's recent movies, this one feels open-ended. It requires a lot of kind of audience participation to put the pieces together.
Yeah, I mean, knowing who Abel Ferrara is, I think adds a lot of context to the film as well, because you understand that, like, this is a man who struggled his entire life, and now he's living in Italy. He's restarting again with a 29-year-old wife.
That's right. And I think potentially, even if you don't know who Abel Ferrara is, you could get something out of this movie, because, the struggles that the Tommaso character goes through. First of all, I think brilliantly played by Willem Dafoe, who does an excellent Ferrara impersonation while also being a little more easy to take than Ferrara
I think if he did and he could probably do a perfect Ferrara impersonation. There's a Conan interview where he's like, Conan, I love that interview you did with Ferrara. And then he makes the face that Ferrara does. And you're like, oh, I know who that is.
Yeah, but in this one, he's got a lot of the sharp edges still.
Mm-hmm. That you can understand the kind of thoughts and feelings and anger that's bubbling under the surface as well.
And I think the way that he carries himself, the way he moves his body, you just feel the years, you feel the experience on him. And it's a character where the past is always present in the present. Mm-hmm. You see that at those AA meetings. The way he carries himself is, I mean, Willem Dafoe looks kind of weird in his old age.
Yeah, well, he's always looked weird from 2000 onward.
And he carries the scars of that in his performance, I think. But on top of all that, I mean, what could you get out of this movie if you don't know who Ferrara is? I mean, it's depiction of somebody in his 60s trying at this late date in his life to make his life better, while also feeling, the weight of the past and the consequences of all the decisions he's made is very powerful, as are just its depiction of just the day-to-day struggles of being in a domestic partnership.
I wouldn't know struggles because I never have any issues and we always get along.
Oh, same, of course. I'm just saying that certain of the scenes where Tommaso and his wife are talking and what begins as a pleasant thing devolves into bickering and then comes back out and then devolves into bickering. Somebody might identify with that.
Yes.
I don't know who could.
I mean, the performance is so strong that we feel that perhaps if that would happen to us, we would understand.
That's right.
And I mean, Dafoe, again, there's always that kind of threat of him going to the next level, which I feel that if you hung out with Abel Ferrara, you would have that when is he going to go to the next level? So he's perfect for portraying that kind of character.
Well, also the two AA meetings that we see in the movie, the first one where he's talking about being in Miami and being on crack and all that, he's so funny and he's so alive when he's telling the story. story. He's telling it almost like a raconteur, but like his tone sort of goes in and out of like regret mode and raconteur mode. And then later when there's the other AA meeting and he's talking about like having abandoned his first family, basically.
Did Ferrera do that? He must have.
He
right?
must have.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's like I think he had a wife.
But he mentions like we adopted children. I was like, who is giving children to Abel Ferrera?
Yeah.
At any point in life?
Well, a number of people have.
Yes. So I mean, yeah, Dafoe. I hope he'll be Ferrera's muse until Ferrera can't make movies anymore because
he'll outlive everyone.
yeah, like a cockroach. But it makes me wonder as well is that like I guess Dafoe for the rest of his career as he kind of ages into the wizened old man, he's on the path that he clearly just wants to keep doing. like Hollywood stuff, let me do indie stuff, Hollywood stuff.
I think it's amazing that he seems to, even at this late date, have a career that doesn't seem compromised.
And he's someone who he said in that Vanity Fair interview that like he looks for roles as well. Like he approached Robert Eggers and said, hey man, please let me do something with you.
And yeah, and I mean, Lars von Trier, I know when Antichrist came out, he said that he'll often call up Lars von Trier and say, what's going on?
That's great.
Do you have anything for me? Like, who seeks out Lars von Trier?
I mean, somebody who does experimental theater and wants to challenge themselves and be in those kind of projects. Well, that's it for Willem Dafoe.
William?
One last one to go out on.
Justin, do we have any letters?
As per usual, you can send us letters at porncinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. Our first letter is from JHB, and he goes, Justin and Will, longtime listener, and was prompted by your comment that The Man from Hong Kong is what James Bond films should be. That comment interested me because Bond movies have a reputation for thrilling action set pieces and being the standard of spy adventures. This comment on going through Will's old reviews on Letterboxd led me to agree that despite the great action, sets, beautiful women, and outrageous villains...
Wait, what great action?
Wait, we're about to get that. The films are mostly lacking, if not dull. This is a childhood favorite franchise, but after seeing someone like Jimmy Wang Yu in action, it's hard for me to be thrilled by a fake Connery Moore karate chop.
Amen, brother.
I don't believe you reviewed the whole series. Will did see every James Bond movie.
I have seen every James
Bond. But was
Bond.
wondering if you could go further into your thoughts on the Bond. Bad or good? Regards, Durango Savage.
Well, I think a lot of the appeal of the James Bond movies, particularly the older ones, is
I was a child when they came out, and it made me feel like a man.
And I'm 70 years old now.
Yes.
But also it's like it's probably like the mood, the atmosphere of it more than anything. Like when I was a kid watching those movies, I've said this before. I've said everything I have to say before, but I'll say it again. I remember renting Goldfinger for the first time, and there was an ad on the VHS that began black screen. Narrator says, "Looking for a little peace and quiet? We didn't think so." And
and then it's like a slow moving camera in Goldfinger.
I know. Well, in that ad, it's like people skiing off hills and explosions and car chases and stuff.
Those are in the movie that are 2.5 hours long.
And they're spread across 20 movies.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've got to enjoy, like, back in the 60s, I think they just enjoyed, like, a guy fatly sitting by a pool, like, smacking a woman's ass. Or,
Yeah.
or they liked...
Waste of a good scotch.
Or if you've seen You Only Live Twice lately, the Dr. Evil villain lair is like the camera just fucking sits there and films that lair for about 15 minutes from every possible angle. And you just had to get into that headspace.
You know what's funny about those movies too is people go, well, that was the action of the time. And it's like, look at what fucking William Whitney is doing. It is 100 times more exciting than anything in the James Bond film.
And yeah, I mean, to say nothing of, I mean, the year that A View to a Kill came out, Police Story came out. I'm like, I'm sorry.
I mean, they tried real late with Tomorrow Never Dies, where like, we could do this Hong Kong thing, right?
I kind of like View to a Kill, though. That's one of my more preferred Roger Moore ones.
Because he's like super old and it's the 80s.
I like that, but then you got Grace Jones, you got Christopher Walken.
And you got your man, Robert Davey, as well.
Well, that's
am I getting that wrong?
License to Kill.
Right. Is Benicio del Toro in A View to a Kill?
He's in License to Kill as well.
Okay.
License to Kill, the second Dalton movie, is kind of good. It feels more like a Jerry Bruckheimer
And then
movie.
they put the brakes on that and they're like, no, this will taint the entire Bond franchise if we make too many good movies. So let's get back to the series basics. People, you don't need to write us any angry letters saying we don't get it.
To be clear, I love James Bond.
I don't know if I could say that.
You can't say that?
And I sat in
I love James Bond without liking most of the
a
movies.
15-hour TIFF marathon.
You sat through that?
Yes, I did. And
God.
I think it was all the Dr. No. What was it was all the Blofeld movies was the gimmick. And did we see even You Never Say Never Again, or is it Diamonds Are Forever? One of those ones.
Never Say Never Again is the one that Connery came back for.
Yeah.
Which is shit. That's
so bad.
That's worse than any of the official ones.
And my most vivid memory of that screening, which started at like 8 p.m. at night, that's too late, people,
goddamn.
is that the person beside me fell asleep with his eyes open. And so he was snoring and he was just staring ahead. And I was like, wow, never seen that before. So that was the highlight of that Bond marathon that I saw.
I wouldn't want to be you in the second half of that marathon where it's like Diamonds Are Forever that's the one where he's in Las Vegas.
Which is the one that starts with the fake Blofeld that they drop in that's Diamonds or you
No, that one is a Roger Moore one. I think it's For Your Eyes Only.
Because they lost the rights to Blofeld, right?
And also that was the year. Was that the year that, or maybe it was Octopus? You know what? I can't remember.
Well, you know what? I've threatened that I will watch all the James Bond movies and we'll do like a Godzilla episode where we go, and you don't need to because you've seen them all already. You can speak off the cuff of those ones.
I miss watching the James Bond movies actually because during the pandemic,
yeah,
you know, my girlfriend and I, it was just a very easy like, what do we do tonight? Let's pick a Bond movie. And yeah, like 4 times out of 5, they would be bad. But also like at a certain point, you get Stockholm syndrome, and it's like, it's Q again.
So who's your favorite Bond? I mean, Pierce Brosnan, obviously.
Yes. So the best one I think is Daniel Craig. Obviously, Connery, you know, planted the flag, but I think it's Daniel Craig. But I like Pierce. He's my boyhood Bond.
Yeah, you know, the Bond you had as a kid. He's also, let's be honest, like Sean Connery, you can understand him being slick and cool. Roger Moore was like 120 when he
Roger Moore is probably my least favorite, honestly.
Yeah, Timothy Dalton, he's got that mean streak.
I like him.
Yeah, but when I think of Bond, and I think that slick Remington steel, and it's Pierce Brosnan.
I love Pierce Brosnan because it's like he's charismatic, but he's also kind of cheesy.
Yes, that's the thing.
Yeah.
And that's what you want from James Bond, as opposed to the full plate of Gouda you get with S'more.
And yeah, like with Pierce Brosnan, he was the one who, when he would say the lines, would like milk it the most. Like, name's Bond, James Bond, like a male model. Whereas Daniel Craig says it as if
like he doesn't want anything to do with this. He just
James Bond.
Yeah, he wants to just keep going. All right, well, thank you very much for that letter. We shall return to James Bond. Yeah,
James Bond will return.
Yeah, exactly. Our next letter goes, watching VHS in 2023.
Yes, please.
This letter is from Nathan, and he goes, hey, Justin and Will. On my way out the door at my last job, I snatched a Sony Trinitron CRT and a VCR DVD combo player that had been sitting in the conference room untouched for probably 15 years. I mainly wanted the TV for retro gaming, but to my surprise, I started trawling Craigslist for VHS tapes. So far, I've picked up a handful of bootleg 50s era Roger Corman films. Let's say there's no such thing as a bootleg Roger Corman film from the 50s because he didn't put a copyright notice on that. So.
That's right. We own those movies.
Yes, the people do. And some 70s, 90s sci-fi movies, including recent Important Cinema Club and Michael and Us subjects, Mad Max, and Galaxy Quest. Now I'm wondering, in 2023, are there any specific films or eras of films that are best experienced on videocassette? Does it simply come down to personal nostalgia? With your expansive physical media collections, do you ever bust out the VCR? Best, Nathan.
Let's start with you, Justin. Do you have any preferred
No. I mean, do I like watching things on VHS? Yeah, I like it. But if you gave me the choice for some films and went, do you want the remastered Blu-ray or do you want it on VHS? I go, give me that remastered Blu-ray.
Yeah, I would say like 99% of the time I'll go for the Blu-ray. But you know what I like on VHS is the Friday the 13th series.
Yeah, so like 80s horror films work good on VHS.
Yeah, and I love it if there's like a commercial at the beginning for like the Tom Savini fan club or something, you know, cool stuff like that. Yeah. I like that vibe.
I like the texture of VHS. Like, I like how it feels and how it looks. He mentions retro gaming, and I think there's a difference there only in that retro gaming was meant for CRT TVs, that if you watch it on HD TVs, it looks wrong because, like, there isn't that softness that you get that people expected when you would boot up your Super Nintendo. And, like, the thing is, like, a lot of films, if they're shot on film, those filmmakers assume they would be projected on a theater screen. Like, that's the way they wanted to see it. Now, is that the way that we think about them in the collective consciousness? Not particularly, which is why I love like VHS versions of movies on Blu-ray or DVD. But like, I don't really whip out my VHS that much, especially because it's become a collector's market of like, if I could just go and I'm like, wow, this rare film on VHS. No, because there's like 30 other people fighting me for it.
I know. I hate that. You used to be able to just get like stuff for cheap. I mean, when Suspect Video closed here in Toronto, I bought a ton of VHS. I wish I got more, to be honest. You know, I'm haunted by the ones I didn't get.
And that are long gone, never to be seen again.
But like, it's fun to watch something like a VHS of, old Nick Zed movies or like something weird video like loop compilations or stuff like that.
Well, those don't exist even on DVD probably.
That's right, yeah.
Because like they made them just for that tape, put it out there, and probably didn't think about it again and lost all the elements.
But the thing almost feels like a historic document itself. Like, were you at the Nitrate Film Festival that one year where they showed like Henri Langlois' print of...
Yes, L'Âge d'Or, yeah.
Yeah, and it felt sort of like, oh wow, this print itself like came from the time. And maybe this
Godard
is just...
watched this print.
Godard himself watched it. And I felt that way, if you watch, your Nick Zed VHS, it's like, oh yeah, he personally had like a
tape to tape, and they was making them and putting them out into the world.
Yeah. Now here it's come all the way here.
The only thing that I idolize of when it comes to VHS specifically and watching them on it is when I would visit Ben Ruffett. He's like, look at my VHS collection. I'm like, oh my God, I've never heard of this movie. Maybe only 10 tapes exist of it. And he hunted it down. I also like the display of VHS. Like if you have shelves and you put all the VHS on them, I just love that kind of video store aesthetic. But that's only because we were kids and that's what we grew up on, right?
I mean, I wish I could go back in time and wander the Blockbuster of my childhood.
Yeah, or the mom and pop shop of your childhood that would have all the weird VHS that Blockbuster doesn't have.
I didn't go to those stores.
You never went to a mom and pop? I mean, I'm trying to think. West Coast Video was a chain, but it felt very mom and pop shop when I was a kid because I only learned decades later that it was run in part by Lee DeMar, the director of Jesus Christ Vampire Hunter.
I guess, when I was really young, like when I was 4 years old, there was one at Crossroads Plaza in Etobicoke, a mom and pop store that we went to before the big Blockbuster was built. Yes, we were part of the problem. And one of my earliest memories is, I loved the Adam West Batman on TV, of course. And I remember seeing at the store Batman the movie with Adam West and being like,
what is
jaw on the floor, like, oh my God, they made a movie of this. And then Dad said, oh, we have to wait till next week. It's rented. And like, I cried. I literally cried. It was like, but no, I have to have it now. That was the longest week of my life waiting for that.
And when you got it, it was worth it, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's exactly what you would want.
It was so great. It had 4 villains.
Yeah. When I think of like walking in and being awed by VHS, the memory that comes to mind is when I would walk into like, small video stores in towns where we would be camping or visiting somebody at a cottage. And like they'd have the big boxes. I'd be like, what is this? Because it would be like kind of an era that was before our time because we were renting in like the mid 90s, but like late 80s, early 90s, that was like the Wild West. As someone like Lloyd Kaufman would say, listen, like videotapes would cost the same. So it would cost the same and take up the same shelf space for something like Saturday Night Fever or whatever trash that Trome was putting out. So it was like the Wild West. And that was the most interesting part of video stores like that. When, when we're going to Blockbusters in the late 90s, it's like, no, they just have a million of the new release and maybe 1 or 2 of like the little releases.
Anyway, you mentioned VHS being a collector's market. That's particularly true in a big city like this. I mean, it's great when you go to like
the little flea markets.
Little out of the way, flea market, small town, and you can find something good.
It's the same thing with bookstores. Like we have big used bookstores here, but it's like, you see the same gosh darn books.
Over. Yeah.
That like anytime you do, you're like, oh, you go for that one book that you're like, that's a rare thing. I need it.
I'm sure you've done that too. Like you're in one of your picked over bookshelves in Toronto and you see that rare book and you like literally like leap toward, like you embarrass yourself.
You like, if Justin is near and you're like, I got to get it before he does.
Yeah. If I'm, by the way, multiple times this has happened, I'll walk past I'm about to go into BMV and Justin comes out and I'm like, oh, well, there's nothing there for me now because he would have got it first.
You just turn around and go back home.
I say, well, I guess I'll go in. But
yeah. Just sadly go through them going, there's nothing here for me. Well, thank you very much for that letter. And as per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com.
Next week on the podcast, we are talking about a broad subject. We're talking about banned movies or unavailable movies or movies that are lost in limbo and available only in bootleg form.
What is the kind of appeal of these films? We live in a time where almost every film available, well, except for The Silence, those are all long gone, unfortunately. But like, the 80s or 90s, if you hear a film was released around that time and is unavailable, you're like, I need to know more about this.
Now, there are so many movies like Mary Harron's I Shot Andy Warhol, like Todd Solondz's Happiness. Like, these are movies that are like lost in a sort of like limbo as well, like Elaine May's Heartbreak Kid. And then there are movies like, Well, I mean, our aesthetic in trying to figure out what we would talk about on this episode are what were the sorts of movies that, when we went to like Suspect Video or something, or you go to DVDRparty.com.
And you would see that like photocopy, like bootleg cover.
The bootleg shelf. What are those kinds of movies? Now, some of the classics of my coming of age, ones like, well, not my coming of age, some of the ones that used to be there, like when I was younger, like the 60s Batman show or Otto Preminger's Skidoo, have since been released.
Mm-hmm.
Those used to be bootleg staples, but there are many that haven't.
Yes. I mean, the majority of the ones I remember being a teenager and being like, oh, I wish I could see that. Like, almost all of them have been released.
Female Trouble is on Criterion now.
Yeah, exactly. But there's still some out there that are still in that kind of, nope, we can't release them, including the Italian Jaws ripoff, The Great White, which, from what I understand, was doing so well at the box office that Universal shut it down, and whatever kind of ruling on it has kept it from being available widely anywhere.
To this day, we'll be looking at 3 Dev Adam, which is a Turkish superhero movie that brings together Spider-Man, Captain America, and there's another superhero in there too, right? It's like the title translates to 3 Mighty Men.
Now, like all of the films that we'll mention, you may be like, well, that's available here. We understand. But like, it's more the idea of like, oh, is there like a crystal clear authorized version out in the world?
Oh, the third superhero in 3 Dev Adam is, of course, Mexican wrestler Santo.
Well, not really Santo.
Not the actual Santo.
A guy wearing a Santo mask.
And of course, we'll be talking about, one of the mothers of them all, a film by no less than Otto Preminger, one of the great filmmakers.
Skidoo!
Not
No.
Skidoo. I wish Skidoo.
Yeah.
But no, Porgy and Bess.
Which was a big budget musical that it just got shut down. I don't know why it's never been released since then.
And we can find it only in horrible quality, and people don't even know if a good print exists anymore.
I remember reading in, what was that 35 millimeter collector's book called?
Magnificent Obsession.
Yeah, where somebody said they had a complete 35 millimeter print, and I assume by this time it has fallen off a shelf and crushed and killed them, and then been thrown out in the garbage. But yeah, a film that still hasn't seen the light of day. We'll watch it. Maybe we'll find out. I have a feeling it'll be like, it's not that good. Also, kind of racist. But that's what we're going to be talking about next week. No, wait, until then, on Patreon this week, what are we talking about, Will?
Well,
I mean, people want to know this.
Justin and I watched Yoga Hosers
at the witching hour from like 12:30 to 2 a.m. in a hotel room.
Yeah, we just had to do it.
Yep. So that's what we'll be talking about. We continue our quest of doing a Patreon episode on every Kevin Smith film. So Yoga Hosers it is. The film with, I don't remember the actors' names.
Ralph Garman.
Yeah, that's right. Ralph Garman. And when I say actors, I mean all the actors under the rainbow that he played.
And we'll probably also talk about some other stuff too. Talk about some movies that we've been watching lately,
But mostly Ralph Garman. So
mostly Ralph Garman.
Until then, my name's Justin Clue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening. Do you like movies that you've never heard about? Then you gotta check out the Important Cinema Club Summer Movie Mind Melter, a 24-hour stream of movies handpicked by me, Justin the Clue, that's happening on twitch.tv/Important Cinema Club this June 10th for 24 hours, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you'd like to see what I've played in the past, just search Summer Movie Mind Melter on Letterboxd, and you will find a list that I made for the last 3 years, I believe. So check it out. It's a great time. Summer Movie Mind Melter, twitch.tv/Important Cinema Club, June 10th, starting at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I would like to thank some of our new patrons, who include Mr. Possum, Trey Hutchinson, Gwyn Roberts, Dan Bowling, Eric, Patrick Carroll, Riku Iso Marku, Patty Delaney, Jackson Noel, Marcus Haar, Martin Law, Luke Gordnier, and Amy Butterfield. Thank you very much for becoming patrons. We could not keep doing this without you.
So we watched Yoga Hosers actually when we were in the greater Boston area, because we went for the first time, well, not my first time, you've been before. We went to the Moturn Extravaganza.
Now, this is something that I wish I could go to every year. I went in, I think 2018 is what Matt Farley figured it out. Wait, what's this, Matt Farley? Well, it's time for you to do the same song and dance you do every time that name comes up.
Well, you never know when you have someone listening for the first time. Matt Farley is the world's most prolific songwriter. He's written over 24,000 songs. You can find them all on Spotify, and they include such songs as the Poop Song,
Poop Under My Fingernails, Poop Into a Wormhole.
Yeah, great stuff like that. And he's also, along with his friend Charlie Roxburgh, one of the greatest living filmmakers. Don't Let the River Beast Get You, Local Legends, Magic Spot, check them all out.
And so me and Will went to the concert. I actually filmed it for an upcoming concert film I'm very excited to put out.
And, what's great about this annual event that he holds is it used to be held almost like a piece of performance art.
Like, can you believe I'm doing this?
Because he was just an obscure guy with no fans, basically, who would hold an extravaganza for himself where he would do a 5-hour concert, maybe show a movie or maybe not. And, 7 or 8 years ago, 15 people would come out. And now, well, over 100 people come out. They come from all over the world.
Yes.
They sometimes cross oceans to get here.
Well, speaking of fans, Will, I think you did something you never did before at the extravaganza, right? Sign autographs.
Oh, I did sign. I wasn't going to say that on mic, but yes.
You'll love it.
You signed autographs too.
Oh, yeah, I'm used to it now.
Yeah.
So this is the way I autograph books.
Well, folks brought copies of our book, Moturn on Moturn.
That's right. And Radioactive Dreams and the movies that I direct. And I really appreciate it. I just wanted to...
Oh, it's wonderful.
Everybody who came up to us and said hello, thank you very much for doing it. But we're also here to talk about the 2 feature films they premiered at this event.
I want to stress this. There was a 5-hour concert and 2 new feature films.
Now, Matt will say that maybe that was a little bit too much, that he won't be doing that again.
Maybe, but I mean, on the other hand, would I trade that experience for anything?
No, I would not.
Incredible.
Like, it's just so surreal. No one ever does 2 new feature films followed by a 5-hour concert, which I gotta say, it was very tiring because I was filming it, but every song I was like, oh yeah, I know this song. And you said a similar thing, right?
Oh, I was just, well, that's the thing. It's like, I always thought of myself, I got into Matt Farley through the movies, and I've always liked the music, but like listening to this concert, it was like, I've been following him for so long that I love every single one of these songs.
Yeah, you do.
Like, how has that happened?
I think a lot of the movie people, then they like get into the music. And I think it's, for me, especially, it was like the concert clicked it into place. I'm like, oh no, this rules. Like, he's very good at this song stuff. And which can get lost because he has so many songs. It can be overwhelming. But check out, I think The Big Heist, they're releasing a new album every week for the next 5 weeks. So check that out on Spotify or wherever you listen to your music. But so the 2 movies that they premiered, the first one, I almost don't want to say too much about it because it's actually not coming out until the fall. It's called I Heard She Got Murdered. And it's a sequel to his kind of stark, serious meditation on being perceived as a failure, Heard She Got Married.
And it just takes things into interesting new directions. Maybe that's, and also, like, when it comes out during the fall, he's going to do some pretty innovative things with it.
Yes, and I don't think he's going to say that unless you ask him directly what he's doing, and then he'll tell you. It's so hard not to talk about that because, like, it is so wild what he's going to do with it, but...
Hey, listen, we got a whole other movie to talk about here, though.
Yeah. But I just want to say, Heard She Got Murdered, when you're watching it, I would highly recommend that you watch Heard She Got Married before. I don't know how impenetrable the film will be if you haven't seen that one. That you're watching and you're like, what are they doing? Like, they're breaking Heard She Got Married. And that's the point. That's what they're trying to do.
Yes.
And it's so funny.
Well, I know you feel this way, too. Every time there's a new Moturn or Shock Marathons movie, you watch it, and for the first 20 minutes, it's like, oh my God, they lost it? And then it's like, oh no.
There's a reveal in Heard She Got Murdered that, like, I fell out of my chair laughing.
So
literally.
Funny.
It was so funny.
And by the way, the reason I have that feeling when we start these movies is because all of their recent movies have gone in some insane new direction.
Well, that's the thing, is that, like, you see clips from their movies and you're like, oh, they're doing the same thing every time, right? Like, they have no, each one is different.
Well, like, I mean, after Slingshot Cops, there was like 5 years where there were no movies. And Slingshot Cops is like, it's like a buddy cop spoof. And then they drop Heard She Got Married, and I was shocked watching it the first time. It's like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't really a comedy. This is a drama. This is contemplative. This has things to say.
Yeah.
I mean, they all have things to say, but this one really does.
Like specifically, yeah.
And then like Metal Detector Maniac, which for the first hour is like, okay, where is this going? Yeah. And then
where it goes.
And then where it goes is insane.
Yes.
And then Magic Spot, which is like
just, very sweet.
And all of that, like, if all you'd seen was River Beast and Freaky Farley,
you think, oh, they do like genre parodies, right?
Yeah, and so when they do that without warning, but then Boston Johnny, and now you've been acclimated.
Yeah, acclimate, poopy, acclimate.
You've been acclimated to what Heard She Got Married did and what Magic Spot did, and now Boston Johnny is like the silliest movie they've ever made.
I think that it's important to also discuss Charlie Roxburgh, because I think what Charlie Roxburgh, the director of these films, he loves the like awkward little look or like holding on someone.
Or the perfectly timed edit.
Yes, he loves that stuff. And like I was standing beside him while we were watching and he'd be like, At just like holding on Matt like one beat too long.
Or like there are the scenes in it where like Matt's talking and he starts talking for too long and then it'll cut mid-sentence.
Yes.
You know?
Okay, so let's talk about Boston Johnny, a film that you can go right now on Vimeo and you can rent it and watch it. So we would highly recommend doing that.
You should. And you should turn the lights off, put your phone away, and just stare at it. You have to be with this movie.
Yes.
And be with this character.
So how would you describe the premise of Boston Johnny?
Well,
Will?
it's a bit like if there was an SNL sketch comedy spin-off movie, but it was not based on any particular character. Like it feels like you're being dropped in media res with like Boston Johnny. You know him, you love him. He's got his catchphrase, "I a time."
Yes.
It's nice.
So
but like there is actually not that character in existence. So like you've seen this character for the first time with no context. That's what the movie
other
is
than
like.
the context of Matt Farley, and
Yeah.
now he's doing this very wacky character. Matt Farley compared it to hearing Little Nicky's voice, Adam Sandler, in the Little Nicky movie, and going, "Boy, that's annoying. What if I made a movie where I did a voice like that the entire time?" And that's what the movie is. I think it's one that like I was laughing throughout it, but it's the next day when we were talking about it that we were laughing even harder.
Well, it's because like these movies
You go like, what is this?
they bring you into their worlds as well, and you sort of accept the rules of the world until you start thinking about it later, and it's like, wait, okay, so the Boston market has like one pitch man,
Yes.
and he does these. Okay, I'm not even gonna bother saying it because you have to see it.
You're talking about pitchmen. We should mention that his rival in this movie is portrayed by Tom Scalzo and called Toronto's own Will Sloan.
Toronto's own Will Sloan.
And they say that name 100 times in this movie.
That's so great, and I love. So he was called that because there was a Kickstarter campaign.
Yes.
By no less than
Golden Ninja Video.
Justin DeClue over here, where people got to, for a certain amount of money, name a character. And somebody who was not me chose Toronto's own Will Sloan.
They did ask you before that. And they said, is it okay if we pick this joke name?
And it's
You were like,
more than okay. I love that like they made the character like snobby and sophisticated as opposed to
He's also wearing a scarf, which Will does in a YouTube video you can find online.
Do I?
Yeah, that Peter Bogdanovich one. You're wearing the scarf.
well-
I would promise you they thought of that because that was a Moturn music video.
That's right. I mean, I was in character as Peter Bogdanovich.
But that's Tom Scalzo portrays the character as a pitchman. And every pitchman in Boston, they shoot in the forest in front of a black sheet where they just sell the product.
Oh man, I mean, I don't know if we're selling this movie at all, like, because it's about the experience of watching it. It's like you compared it to Freddy Got Fingered. It's one of those kind of like patience testing comedies that like,
well, I would
with
say
an abrasive lead.
Do you like Tim Robinson's I Think You Should Leave, the Netflix TV show? That's kind of on that wavelength, but like feature length as well. And again,
it's sort of like a parody of a Mike Myers kind of movie.
And like it's so tough to do that, but I think they just nail it.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about all the time, and like his accent is all over the place.
And there's sort of a joke about how like in all these movies there are these really abrasive characters that you're just sort of expected to love.
Yes.
And in this one, it sort of takes it to the extreme of like he's a monster as well. Like he's a horrible guy, and like the movie and he do nothing to curry your sympathy. And it's so and it's so committed to that joke.
And now we ask, what will Moturn do next? I don't know.
Whatever they want, if you ask me.
They said Evil Puddle is their next one, which is their sequel thematically to Magic Spot.
Well, we'll see.
Yep, and we'll be there. And for the first 15 minutes, we're going to be like, did they lose it? Like we do every time, because they haven't.